Rockville is known as a city of neighborhoods, and one that reveres its roots. We had the opportunity to meet with 4 experts on some of Rockville's modern planned neighborhoods. Using historian Teresa Lakeen's book, Rockville's Recent Past, as a blueprint, the Rockville 11 team offers a closer look at the city's neighborhoods from the mid-20th century to today, or otherwise known as Rockville's Recent Past. We begin our tour with the neighborhood of Twinbrook. This single-family residential area was developed in the 1940s and 1950s and experienced tremendous growth in the years that followed World War II.
Well, Twinbrook is sometimes called the quintessential American suburb. That's sort of its unofficial nickname, if you will. And it was the work of Joseph Gerhardt, who immigrated from Belgium, and was a developer in Montgomery County, and then acquired land in the area we now know as Twinbrook. He named that because of the 2 streams which bisect the area, and started building houses in the late 40s through the 1960s. He built in several stages, and the homes started out as relatively small by our standards, became more sophisticated and with more amenities, and I think the kitchens were updated. But the basic premise was to give people a home that was a starter home. The streets were named after battles, famous military battles of World War II and I think World War I as well, to appeal to patriotic-minded buyers or veterans returning looking to settle down with wives and have families. And these were considered starter homes. You could either live in them a while and sell and move up, if you will, or you could expand. You could add a top floor or build out the back. They were meant to be homes that offered a lot of versatility for young families. Pretty soon schools were built in the area, and they built the Twinbrook Shopping Center. That was another of Gerhardt's projects. Gerhardt was very far-sighted in terms of wanting to help build a community. Not all developers after the Second World War were interested, they were more motivated by profit, but Gerhardt seems to have been committed to the neighborhood and to the well-being of the community and seeing it grow and prosper.
Elevations and over 15 different color combinations give this new community of Twinbrook Forest a distinction all of its own.
I think you can go through, you can drive through Twinbrook and find houses that seem relatively unaltered. We've been able to identify any number of those. But then there are homes also that have been remodeled on the exterior. Some have, instead of the 50s modern look, they now have colonial, they have colonial facades, dormers and things that you wouldn't have found on the Twinbrook homes. And in a way, it's a great place to go and study public taste in housing styles, the ways in which people have modified a home to suit their own tastes. And that makes it a very interesting and versatile neighborhood.
Woodley Gardens is located in the north-central section of the city, east of I-270. Much of the neighborhood is a mix of single-family homes and townhouse units that were built in the 1960s.
Well, it's typical red brick colonial-style homes that are in a wooded area and has a very strong community feel in the neighborhood. It's near I-270, so it has easy access to get around. It's also near the metro, but it has a neighborhood feel to it that you have a little shopping area there, you've got a park, you used to have a school, it now has a senior center, and it's a neighborhood that a lot of people have grown up in and then come back and live, or else their parents stay living there and so they come and visit their parents.
The neighborhood was created in part from a change in the county's zoning law.
Well, back in the early 1960s, Montgomery County made a new designation for zoning that allowed the the developers to come in and do a pre-planned community as opposed to doing individual sites. And so Woodley Gardens is the very first community that was built using this new designation. Monroe Warren, both senior and junior, it's a father-son team, came in and they set aside land for single-family homes, for townhomes, for apartments. They set aside land for a park, for a little shopping center, and also for the elementary school.
Woodley Gardens offered a neighborhood with new features to potential homeowners.
He advertised it as being a country club community, and this was in some ways to recognize the fact that it was a pre-planned community because he fully intended to have a pool, so the country club atmosphere. But he also wanted to counter views about Rockville at the time, which was considered part of the boonies, the sticks, a working class neighborhood. And he wanted to upgrade that image by building in Rockville a more kind of a traditional architectural design, but using a modern zoning designation to make it a community feel to it.
Architecturally speaking, the original integrity of the neighborhood has stayed the same over the years, offering a glimpse into the style of homes from the 1960s.
I think the biggest change has been that the elementary school was closed in 1979, and that became the senior center in 1982. The building was renovated. It's been renovated several times since then, and it's become really a mecca for our senior citizens in the city to come to. The one other strange aspect of our neighborhood, I would say, is that we have a few modern houses, and people see those on Nelson Street. Those were built in the 1970s, and there's a couple actually modern houses that are right in the neighborhood itself. And those are by a different builder than Monroe Warren, and when they were first built, people were like, oh my goodness, these are so different looking, how could they fit in with the neighborhood? But with time, because of the trees growing up around them and things, and our own sensibilities changing, I think that they've just fit right into the neighborhood, and we're all talking among each other, and we're all having a lot of fun in the neighborhood and enjoying the fact that we have a great place to live.
Numark Commons is a quiet neighborhood located near I-270 Town Center and the Rockville Metro Station. It was incorporated in 1967 and has a mix of single-family units and townhomes. University of Maryland Associate Professor of Architecture Isabel Gurnay is an expert on Numark Commons. She shared her thoughts on some of the unique features of this neighborhood.
I would describe it as a late modern subdivision which tries to mix densities and preserve nature. There was a lake dug by hand, and the Numark Lake is kind of a successor to a large tradition of ornamental lakes around which houses would be built. So that was one really interesting feature. The other one was the entrance. You don't see houses, but you see a kind of pylon which looks like a totem, very interesting in wood, and which is kind of a symbol of Numark.
Numark Commons was designed to be a new mark upon the landscape, as one of the first planned unit developments to be approved under an ordinance adopted by the city in 1964. Numark Esplanade, the main thoroughfare, was the only street in the community designed for through traffic. The original street plan called for 3 access points to the project.
And they were able to get Numark Esplanade, the main street, to be closed on one side. So it became a dead-ending street, and it was not viable anymore to get that little shopping center. That's really an issue which, if you want to embed in the middle of a community this type of amenity, it's not so easy. It's a little better, and usually to put it a little bit on the side where it's easily accessible from outsiders, and still people who live in the neighborhood can walk to it.
Open space is one of Numark's primary amenities. About 15.6% of the total site is open space, including the 4.5-acre lake and the pedestrian walkway system.
It was to keep as many mature trees as possible, and that was something he would always do, a tree survey. So any tree which was more than, I think, 12 inches in diameters were marked and would not be removed unless, you had to. And he wanted to, he kept the underbrush. And it's wonderful to walk in Numark. You've got all kinds of smaller, formal or informal ways to go through the neighborhood.
Located in downtown Rockville, the Americana Center gives residents a unique perspective of the city. Built in the late 60s, the garden-style apartments offer a community experience in the midst of city living. Teresa Lakeen gives more insight on the features of this neighborhood.
Americana Center is a multifamily residential, actually a community. Most people think of apartment buildings as sort of impersonal, but it is a community in every sense of the word. Was part of urban renewal, was built as part of the mid-city urban renewal for the 1960s and early 70s. And it's sort of right out there at the intersection of Jefferson Street and Hungerford Drive, Rockville Pike. It's also kind of secluded because it's sheltered by the streets and it focuses inward on itself. But it is in every sense of the word, a neighborhood like other Rockville neighborhoods. It was developed, planned and developed by Carl M. Freeman Associates. Freeman is well known in this area as a pioneer in multifamily housing and garden apartments. And this was a project that came relatively late in his career. He had a number of projects in Virginia and Montgomery County and throughout the metropolitan area, and won numerous awards for his work, for his design work. Once Metro came through, it became a really convenient place to live. But in the 70s, it was also convenient to public transportation up and down Rockville Pike and throughout Rockville. And as part of urban renewal, it was a residential component of a much bigger project that modernized the downtown area, that reconfigured the streets from a rather old town street grid to a modern configuration of street patterns. And it was also touted as being convenient to shopping in much the same way that the Noontown Center affords the same sort of, and to decrease the need for auto dependency. And we've looked at photographs from the 70s and 80s, and the architectural character of the buildings, it's been beautifully maintained, for one thing. And the architectural character is basically unaltered, which is a good thing. It's very much of it still looks very much like the 70s modernism. The most recent changes have been improvements to what they call the Plaza Deck, which is a commons area in the center of the Americana complex. It's a recreation, public use space. And it was originally planned a couple of years ago to address problems in the water problems in the parking garage. But they replaced the entire deck, and they installed new landscapes and planters and light fixtures, and they made the commons area much less austere and more inviting and more welcoming. It has softer edges, a lot more planting, and I think now it does indeed evoke the ideals of a so-called garden apartment, because there are mature trees and perennials, annuals, flower beds and the like, in addition to benches, tables. It's a much more inviting space than it was when Carl Freeman designed it. It's less austere, and people there seem to like to make use of it.
Drive by King Farm on Route 355 and you'll notice some of the signs of its former life as a working farm. The 440-acre area was annexed to the city in 1995 and was developed as a comprehensive planned community. Rockville Chief of Planning Jim Wasilek has seen the progress of King Farm and shared his thoughts on what makes King Farm different.
I would describe it as a neo-traditional neighborhood. It's kind of a planning theme that emerged late 80s, early 90s. Now, going back to how development patterns were maybe 100 years ago, and when single-family homes really came to prominence, they really were closer together, closer to the street, had front porches, and it was a little more pedestrian-friendly, mainly because the influence of the automobile hadn't taken place yet. So there was a thought that we needed to go back to that due to some of the real or perceived ills of regular suburban development. I think it's been an addition to kind of the examples of new urbanism or neo-traditional development that have occurred around the country. In this region, the Kentlands in Gaithersburg is probably kind of the leading example. And this is just kind of added to that. I'm not sure anyone's kind of used King Farm as a model, but it's certainly been a model of success.
Thought of today as a thriving multimodal community, King Farm is deemed a success for many reasons.
I think it has been, and I don't say that, I guess I could say that from a planning perspective, but just from a livability perspective, everyone that I know that lives in King Farm seems to really love it. And when you go there, it just seems almost kind of ideal. There's families in the parks and walking on the streets and on their porches. And that was what was really intended with the development, to bring people out of their homes.
Rockville's tapestry of neighborhoods make up the fabric of the city's story. As the city continues to grow, these neighborhoods will serve as a record of Rockville's recent past.